Karim Benzema has finally answered the question of whether he's leaving Al Ittihad. Whilst Arsenal supposedly set around 50 million euros aside for a striker, whilst Tomiyasu, sadly, will be staying at the Asia Cup a little bit longer. This is the Arsenal Transfer Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Thank you, as always, for making this a part of your morning routines. It is very much appreciated. You've made it to Thursday. We've got one more day and then it's Friday, which is the weekend, as we know. So we can make it through this comfortably, easily, happily, and fingers crossed, of course, with plenty to get excited about with Arsenal returning to action next week on Tuesday. We've got to get through a weekend of FA Cup action, which is, who cares? The FA Cup, who cares? If Arsenal aren't in it, who cares? But good morning to those joining us live or evening or afternoon or even maybe in the night for some of you. But thank you so much for joining us in the chat box. Blackshine, Jimbo, Peekahoo, Kaiser, Steve, Stevie, Rich, Matt G, Glenn, Derek, Damien, Paul, Josh Ismail, Martin, Alvin Mods, Ara Silky, Sweat and Merlot, Paul, Carlson, Martin, Rowan, Amesy, Jose, Amira, Carl World Citizen, Temi, Barry, and plenty more of you guys and girls as well. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. It is very much appreciated if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on, so you never miss a show. That would be awesome. Jamie says, morning, Gunners. First time I've seen the show live for a while. Try saying that 10 times when you're drunk. I've seen the show. There we go. We're in the zone. Right, shall we crack on with today's stories? I think we should. First of all, please, if you haven't done so already, go and catch up on the latest live upload on the channel. I was joined by Alex from A Different Knock, fantastic YouTube channel looking analytically at Arsenal, doing some fantastically well-produced videos, talking all about things as we know and have come to love this club, but also criticizing, critiquing as well, and asking some really tough questions of the club. And we asked some tough questions and tried to answer them as well. We talked a little bit about the youth side of things and the debate around whether or not Arteta gives youth players a chance. We talked about sales. We talked about how we should play better. We basically looked at all the different questions we've got about the club at the moment and try to tackle them from different points of view. I think it was one of the best interview shows that we've done. And I can see plenty of you guys seem to enjoy it in the chat box as well, which is great to see. So if you haven't given that a watch, I recommend going and catching up on that one from last night. Now, Arsenal have eased into the quarterfinals. 6-0 win over Reading. Leah Williamson returned to the team. Fantastic news. Fantastic to see her involved, smiling away on the touchline as she came off the bench. But 6 goals from 4. Blackstenius with a hat-trick. Kadina and Mead getting on the score sheet there. Really, really solid display. And Jonas Eideval will be very, very happy indeed to see us progress through the League Cup. Of course, the Men's League Cup final has now been arranged with Liverpool facing Chelsea, but we're now into the quarterfinals, which is fantastic to see. And it was a chance for some players as well that don't tend to play all that often for the Arsenal women's team to get a chance in the team also, which was good. We saw D'Angelo, of course, starting goal. But to be fair, it was a relatively strong side. It didn't include the likes of Russo or Mead from the start, or of course Leah Williamson coming off the bench as well. Emily Fox also on the bench since arriving this January too. But a really solid win. And we eased into the next round of the tournament. However, Takehiro Tomiyasu, whilst has also eased into the next round of the tournament he's currently involved in at the Asia Cup in Qatar, sadly, that means that he will be delayed in his return. That said, we still wish him all the best of luck. And he did indeed play in their final game against Indonesia as they won yet again. It's the first time he started so far this tournament. He missed the first game as he was building up fitness. He came off the bench in the second game, but started this final group stage game, which should hopefully give us a big indication that he's indeed now back and available for selection. And when he returns eventually from the Asia Cup, it'll be great to have him back in the squad. And I think that there was evidence last night. Athletic Club played, and of course, as you may know, if you're and have been watching the African Cup of Nations, you'll know that Ghana were eliminated, and Nico Williams returns to play for his club, Athletic Club, and Iñaki Williams scored. You've got Nico Williams, of course, on the bench as well, but Iñaki Williams scoring in that game to the Williams brothers. And I've had a few people suggest to me that Iñaki Williams or Nico Williams could be interesting picks, but knocking Barcelona out of the Copa del Rey, fantastic win for them. Yeah, certainly great to see more suggestions that you can indeed return from a tournament and have an immediate impact as well, which is obviously a real benefit to any club getting their players back, which Liverpool will not be with Salah, even though he's injured. He's still with Egypt, as they dramatically still went through in their group as well. But lots of international matches going on, and lots of exciting football still to be played. But Arsenal will have to wait a little bit longer for Tomiyasu to come back. Now, Karim Benzema has been speaking about all the drama that's been surrounding him as a player. As we know, he's been linked with a move away from Al Ittihad. A number of outlets have reported this story and claimed that there's been discussions going on with a number of clubs. Well, L'Équipe have reported this story. L'Équipe have said that Karim Benzema, responding to these links, said it's completely false. The French media don't know what to invent anymore. The bigger, the better. So, is indeed and has indeed all of these Benzema stories been just basically hogwash, if you like, have been absolute rubbish. And Benzema will indeed, it seems, if his words are to be believed, be staying with Al Ittihad, and that he doesn't want to leave the club. Maybe he's talking in more absolutes, and he's talking in reference to a permanent exit from Saudi Arabia instead of just suggestions that he might leave on loan. But it is very interesting to be that dismissive of any potential transfer, if indeed Benzema has been quite heavily linked with leaving. And of course, we know the well-documented story about him not arriving for pre-season training, and Gallardo, the Al Ittihad manager, of course, speaking out on this too. So it's a little bit confusing. It is a little bit confusing. We'll continue to follow this story. I imagine this will be one that runs through until the end of the January transfer window. But Arsenal continue to be talked about by a number of outlets as a club that would be keen on signing him. What I would say is that I'm sure that Arsenal are being spoken about, like in agents talk. I'm sure they would have been spoken to or offered the chance to sign him, maybe, and then it's depending on what kind of talks go on from there. But it would, if Arsenal were to sign Benzema, of course, it would need to be with a really significant wage drop, a massive wage drop. So yeah, let's see what happens there. And our headline story of the day is according to Gazzetta dello Sport, which means that I think you need to get your salt shakers at the ready. Have said that Arsenal have apparently set aside 50 million euros to try and sign Joshua Zirkzee in the summer. The Bologna and Netherlands international has, of course, had a really strong season. We know that we've been linked with Zirkzee throughout the course of this window. There is genuine interest in the player. The interest in the player is absolutely real, and Arsenal have been following the player for a while. However, the suggestions that we put away this money aside to try and sign him in the summer at the moment, I think, is a little bit of a stretch. But the interest in the player is certainly genuine. But whether or not Arsenal end up moving for him above other potential striker options, we will have to wait until that summer transfer window, of course, to find out. But he is a player that is on the radar and is of a liking to the club. I'd love to have a striker as good as, well, a forward player at least, as good as Dennis Bergkamp, of course, in this Arsenal team. He'd be providing some fantastic passes to the likes of Gabriel Jesus, I'm sure, and maybe scoring some brilliant goals from his attacking position that he did so often. And you can, of course, win the chance to get a signed and framed shirt of Dennis Bergkamp in the latest competition on Football Prizes. There is 599 tickets available in this competition. 243 have already gone, which means we're closing in on halfway already, and it's only been up for a couple of days. The link is in the description if you would like to get involved. It is a UK-only competition. I have to stress that, unless you've got friends in high places to get you involved in this, in regards to maybe a friend over in the UK that can enter for you. But certainly it's an amazing prize and worth getting involved in. And not only that, but just by entering, you enter yourself into lots of other instant win prizes, such as a Rice shirt, a Zinchenko shirt, some other framed Arsenal shirts and memorabilia as well, photos that have been signed. So yeah, just get involved. Do not miss out on this chance to win what is an amazing opportunity to get some fantastic things. In fact, I can tell you all the prizes. It's a Declan Rice signed 23-24 home shirt, an Alexander Zinchenko signed 23-24 home shirt, an Emil Smith-Rowe signed and custom framed Arsenal shirt, a Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang signed and custom LED framed Arsenal shirt as well, a Patrick Vieira signed Arsenal photograph, a Thomas Partey signed Arsenal photograph, Lee Dixon, Tony Adams, Steve Bold, and Nigel Winterburn signed photographs, and a 23-24 Arsenal home shirt as well. So, as well as lots of football prizes, site credit as well to enter future competitions. Huge prize. Get involved. Just by buying a ticket, you enter yourself into a chance to win lots of other prizes as well. And you can buy multiple tickets as well. Right, shall we go to part 2 and your questions right after this? Okay, let's jump into the chat box, shall we, and take some of your questions. We did have a from Costa, the Cape Town Gooner, dropped in a little super chat. Thank you, Costa. That's very kind of you indeed. If you did mean to leave a little comment, because sometimes what happens is you leave super chats and then forgot to leave the comment, which I think you have done because you've left another one. But thank you so much for that, Costa. It says, finally, I made it to a live show after months of Spotify. Hope you're taking care of yourself, Tom. Do you think the 10-day gap will do us well? Thank you, first of all, Costa, for your kind donation and your kind words. And welcome over from Spotify. I know that plenty of you do listen on audio-only platforms. I don't blame you. It means you don't have to see this ugly mug. But indeed, on the 10-day gap, I think actually, in a weird way, I think Arsenal probably would have preferred to play sooner. We won that game 5-0, and now we've got to wait an extended period of time for our next game. It is an extra chance for rest. It's more time for Thomas Partey, of course, to potentially return from his injury. There's suggestions that he could be in training this week. Charles Watts reporting that on his channel the other day, which is obviously great news for Arsenal. So let's see if indeed we have any sight of Thomas Partey in training ahead of the game against Nottingham Forest and potentially an involvement in that game from the bench. And then ahead of that game against Liverpool, it'd be great to see him potentially involved. But I think the team would probably have rather played a little bit sooner, actually, and gone into that next game to keep building that momentum. But we move, we see what happens. Of course, Nottingham Forest will be in action tomorrow night as they play Bristol City. Mark says, if we got Benzema on a no-fee loan with the Saudis paying his wages, of course I'd say yes. But at the price, his inability to press and the changes that we'd have to make for him, it's a no. I've said this before. If he was available for a financially feasible loan move, I think we'd be mad to turn down the idea of it, to be honest. It's just obviously if you had to pay the extortionate wages of like 30 million for the rest of the season plus, that's when I start to have questions about the idea of signing Benzema. But actually, as a profile, of course, I think it'd be a great option. He creates goals, he scores goals, and his form's not dropped off. You know, really, he scored, I think, 9 goals and got 5 assists in 15 games. So 14 goal contributions in 50 Saudi League games. And if you look at his numbers prior to him moving to Saudi Arabia, it wasn't like they dropped off dramatically. I think he got over 30 goals last season for Real Madrid. He got over 40 goals the season before that. This isn't someone whose form has dropped off a cliff at all. So if it was financially feasible, I absolutely would get Benzema for the last 6 months of the season, but it's just that financial feasibility that stops it. Alex says, Tom, is there any player that you used to like and then he's done something that's changed your mind? For me, it was Henrik Larsson. I loved him at Celtic, but those assists for Barca in the Champions League final. Is there a player that I used to like? Eden Hazard. I used to love Eden Hazard. When he was at Lille, I think I talked about this story before, but when I first joined Twitter as a naive teenager, one of the first things I did was followed an account called Eden Hazard to Arsenal because I was so determined that I wanted, not determined, that's the wrong word, but so enthralled by the idea of him joining Arsenal. I'm trying to talk about players that aren't Arsenal players because it's easy to say players that, of course, were at Arsenal, like Van Persie or Nasri or Fabregas or Adebayor, even though, to be honest, Fabregas I quite like still. Ashley Cole, obviously, I can see a lot of you throwing in these suggestions in the chat box, but like it's easy to do the Arsenal ones because obviously they betrayed us, if you like, but it's the players, I think, outside of Arsenal that are the more funny ones to try and come up with. D says, thank you, Tom, for always covering the women's news. For some of us not in the UK, it's often difficult to follow closely as we would like. D, you're very welcome. I will never stop continuing to highlight the results and any potential transfer news that gets announced. Of course, I can't go into it as much detail as I do with the men's, just mainly because of time. Of course, is the main one. But there are, of course, some people out there that do plenty more dedicated work in the women's game. Tim Stillman being obviously the GOAT for me in that regard. So certainly you can access it there. But we will not be dissuaded ever from talking about the women's team, no matter what sexist trolls decide to try and pop up in the chat box here and there. Gooner Jake says, "Hey Tom, any closed door friendlies?" I don't know. Actually, I know that Man United apparently played one and lost against Burnley, which is quite funny. But I don't know if we have got one. Maybe it's one that I need to chase up. But thank you, Jake, for letting us know. Rich says you'd like a Bergkamp, but do we need a Ljungberg more, i.e., someone who scores the ugly tap-ins rather than the beautiful goals? I think we have the Bergkamps already in Erdogan. Yeah, obviously I was just doing a little segue, wasn't I? But you're right. I would rather us have another wide player come in and add some more depth. I talked about this with actually Alex yesterday on our Let's Talk Arsenal show. So yeah, I think you're right. I think a winger is probably more in need of being signed than a Bergkamp type player. Rakesh says it's the finishing that we are lacking. Benzema is a poacher and perfect for us right now, considering the fact that Jesus and Nketiah have not been doing too much. Kind of builds on what I've said already about wanting Benzema if we could get him. Fuad says hypothetical question: Tom, if Barca were to fire Xavi, and somehow Arteta goes there, who would be your top replacement? I don't want Arteta out. Trust me, I just wanted to see what your answer would be. Cheers, mate. It's tough, isn't it? I mean, what, sack him now and he goes now? Who would I want? I've said before that if Arsenal do go for another manager in the future, I think it has to be someone who's like got a momentum of winning at the top level, and that is tough to find. It's really, really hard to find. I've always thought about maybe Luis Enrique. At PSG, I know he's there at the moment, but that'd be probably quite difficult to do. I'm not sure you'd be able to get him. Of course, Ancelotti comes to mind, but he's only just signed a new deal at Real Madrid. What I'd probably do if Arteta was to go in the middle of the season is I'd probably just ride out the rest of this season and then wait till the summer and then see if you could find a top. I think it'd be the wrong decision to panic. Now, obviously, hypothetically, it's never going to happen, but I think the right decision would probably be to wait until the end of the season and bring probably an interim coach in until the end of the campaign. Do what Chelsea did in some ways by bringing in maybe a temporary coach like Lampard. Not Lampard for us, but obviously that's what they did. And then you bring in someone in the summer. But obviously that isn't going to happen. Chan Ho says, saw Van Persie's comments about where his football home is. He must really hate us to choose Man United instead. We nurtured him and gave a chance for 8 years. And he's and this is his view on us. Can you really blame him? Can you really blame him for saying that he feels Man United are his home more than Arsenal? He left there. He left us, went to Manchester United. Obviously terrible, Judas and all that. But when he's gone there, all he's had since leaving Arsenal is untold abuse and stick and criticism and hate. And now we're mugged off that he says that his home is now Man United, who he won a title at and is very much well loved by, if not all Man United fans. I really don't think it's that much of a surprise that he says that Man United is his home, because I don't think you could see Arsenal as your home anymore after that. Matt G says, option 1, sign Benzema this month and no one else. Option 2, sign no one in January, but the whole team is back fully fit and we have no more injuries for the rest of the season. Oh, obviously option 2, Matt. It's so obviously option 2. Yes. Bring back Timber, bring back Partey, bring back Vieira, bring back Tomiyasu. Of course, no, he's not injured. He's away at the Asia Cup. But if we can avoid injury of Tomiyasu for the rest of the season, of course, option 2 would be far better. Far, far better. You'd have to be mad to choose option 1. The idea of keeping a team injury-free for an entirety of a half season is something you can't put a price on. So, yeah, you'd have to be mad to pick option 1. I'm sure there are some mad people out there, but you'd have to be mad. Robert says you're trying to be too politically correct so much with that female football. It's really hard to listen to. Robert, I have to say, I think that says more about you. Chris says we had another Bergkamp. His name was Ozil. You can't deny how good he was. Him and Alexis in the team, we would have won the league last season. It's easy to say, isn't it? It's easy to say. We had Alexis and Ozil under Arsene Wenger for many years, and we never came close to winning the league with those players. So I really don't think that it's it's cut and dry. Ozil was a world class player. Alexis was a world class player. For me, I prefer Alexis. I thought he was one of my favourite players to ever watch in an Arsenal shirt. But yeah, there's no doubt their quality was unreal. John says, TGT, keep doing the weekly competition shout outs. I was lucky enough to win the Martinelli competition yesterday. John, congratulations, mate. I love it when the listeners tell me that you've won it. It's always great to know that one of our listeners, of course, I know Football Prizes do links with others, but it's so great to know that you won that. So, John, congratulations. I'm so glad that you won the latest comp. That's fantastic. Robert says, fair play. Just my opinion regarding the comment on women's football. If you are so worried about it, Worried about it? I'm not worried about it. It's Arsenal. Why not pay more attention to wheelchair football or esport football? Do Arsenal have a wheelchair team or an esport team? Robert, maybe you can tell me. Do we have an esport? Does Arsenal have an esport team or a wheelchair football team? Arsenal wheelchair football team. Let me have a quick look. Arsenal. We have our Disabled Supporters Club, but do we have a wheelchair football team? I don't think we do. Unless I'm being really ignorant and I don't know, but I'm pretty sure we don't. Looking on this, it doesn't look like we do. Do we have an Arsenal esport team? Let's have a quick look. Arsenal FIFA esports. When was this? Seems we don't have one from the looks of things. We did have one from the looks of things, but I don't know if we have one anymore. It seems we had one in 2020, but there's not been an update on the Arsenal esports team for, well, quite some time. It looks like Zinchenko has launched an esports organization. So there you go. So hold on. So despite this is funny. People are going to say, Tom, why are you giving this person any attention? The reason why I give people like Robert attention is because their arguments fall apart so hilariously and quickly. So Robert has said that I'm too politically correct, which, by the way, I never really know what politically correct means. I think politically correct just means being a pretty nice bloke, to be honest. B, Robert has suggested that if I'm giving as much attention to the Arsenal women's team, I should also be giving attention to the Arsenal wheelchair football team, which doesn't exist, and the Arsenal esports team, which doesn't exist. Can you see how that's slightly funny? Robert, I appreciate your criticism, I do, but it's a little funny how it's fallen apart so hilariously. Wrath of Aries says, what about Artem Dovbyk from Girona? He's played really good this season, 20 games, 14 goals, 5 assists. Could be a good striker option in the summer and would be more affordable. Dovbyk is having a fantastic campaign, as, of course, is the entire Girona side under Michel, who are having a fantastic campaign. At 26 years of age, he's obviously of an age where if you're going to buy him, he's not like a young 20, 21, 22-year-old striker. I think he's having a brilliant season because, of course, Girona are having a brilliant season overall. It's really difficult to know whether or not he'd be able to translate that. We've seen times where teams have had fantastic campaigns. We did it once. You think about Olivier Giroud. We signed Olivier Giroud from Montpellier the season after they won the Liga title. And I think he was 25, 26 when we signed him. And, of course, it was like, he wasn't ever able to, I think, replicate what he managed to do. Let me find out how many goals he scored, Giroud, for Montpellier. It's a really interesting thought, actually. So Montpellier, he scored 25 goals. He never scored that many goals for Arsenal. He scored 24 in his best season, 22 in his second season across all competitions. So, yeah, if you sign a player from a club that are having a fantastic kind of one-off season and you're signing kind of a player in their mid to late 20s, it's going to be very difficult. Maybe, I guess. Pepe's another good example. Richer, right? Yeah. Fantastic season for Lille when they won the league. But Monaco, you look at Monaco won the Liga season with Kylian Mbappe. Look how good he's been. But that said, Bakayoko was brilliant in that season, never was able to replicate that at Chelsea or ever again. So, yeah, it's very, very difficult to know categorically. But Dovbyk is having a great campaign. One to keep your eye on until the end of the season. And I agree with Rob that Giroud was definitely an underrated striker, and I think maybe one that we shouldn't have replaced in the end with Lacazette. Lacazette never took us any further. Lacazette wasn't any better. In fact, I think that Giroud was probably better. And is better, I think, still than Lacazette all these years later. Aaron, Thomas Lemar, another great shout, went to Atletico Madrid, never really did too much, and we put in that massive bid. Remember the huge bid we put in for him? That would have been great if we'd have got Lemar for 100 million back in 2017. That would have been hilarious. I mean, it would have been hilarious at all. It would have probably been a disaster. Chris says Harry likes the sound of him, but feels the only difficulty is his current team is part of the City group. Yeah, of course. Girona being that part of CFG do make things very, very tricky. Robert's back. I like these back and forths. I know people say I should ignore it, but I quite like it. It's not criticism. It's not criticism. Just going on and on about a niche part of the football club getting way more attention and money compared to the actual level and fans, genuine attention to any other part and section. Robert, you've moaned about parts of a club that don't exist. How can I? There's no wheelchair Arsenal team. Unless I'm being incredibly ignorant, there is no official wheelchair Arsenal team. You've got to come with like an actual position, like rather than one that doesn't exist. It is funny. Morgie says, I'm loving the AFC women's team now. Leah, Kim, Little, and Viv are back and looking stronger for the rest of the season. Arteta will be jealous of that squad strength. You look at the options that we've got in attack. You know, it's since obviously we signed Russo in the summer, but Blackstenius got a hat trick last night. It's doing fantastic things. We brought back Beth Mead. Viv Miedemar is still here. It's an amazing amount of depth we've got in that squad. And Jonas Eidevall, the expectations upon him are going to rise incredibly. You know, we're not in the Champions League this season because of the real disappointment we had in the summer against Paris. And we absolutely, I think, have to win something. I know we won, of course, the trophy last season, but in the Conti Cup, but we have to, I think, deliver something again this year. And that's the difference, I think, between the men's and the women's team right now, is you look at where the women's team are at in the context of the WSL, in the context of even European football, even though we're not in it this season. And you could look at the context of Arteta's Arsenal side in the men's football this season, and it's different. The expectation on Arsenal is to win the trophies. That Arsenal will be expected, even though Chelsea are as good as they are, there will be expectations that are higher, of course, on that side of things, with the women's side, than actually the expectations on the men's side of things. It is an interesting dynamic between the two. Thank you, Robert, for sparking this conversation. It's really important to put more emphasis on the women's game, and I thank you for bringing it to people's attentions. James says, if Brentford offered Tony in January on a 1 million loan fee with an obligation to buy for an additional 79 million paid over 3 installments, would you go for it? In brackets, yes. I went very specific. You did, James. I mean, it'd be tricky to say no to that, I guess, wouldn't it? If you're going to pay, I mean, we say paid in 3 installments. It doesn't really matter. The whole installments thing is a little bit here or there. Amortization is what really matters these days, even though installments is how things are paid. Amortization is how it shows up on the books more so. So, yeah, I think 80 million for Tony in January. Are you going to be able to get a better striker? I'm not sure. I still struggle with that figure. I really think he's a 40, 50 million pound player. And I don't know if I could jump to that level at all. I really, really don't. I really, really don't. Let's go to it's hard not to laugh at some of these comments sometimes. Carlton says, let's all chip in and buy Robert a season ticket for the Arsenal women's team. Brilliant. Chris says you could argue that the women's team is better than the men's team. I mean, contextually, absolutely. You look at the context of the women's team competitively over the last decade compared to the men's team. Of course they are. They've been in the Champions League, you know, for so many successive seasons up until now. Yeah, it's so difficult to have an argument that the men's side is even, you know, a better contextually than the women's team in their own league. It's very, very difficult. So there you go. I need to read you this back and forth because it's brilliant. Matt G says Robert is acting as if Tom has set up another channel to discuss Arsenal women's. Tom mentioned the score. Robert has spent more time talking about women's football than Tom has. And Robert's replied by saying, Matt G, I listen every morning and it's on and on. I literally mentioned the score, like when they have a game and when there's a transfer. Well, that is it. That's the only time I mentioned the women's game. It's so funny. This has really tickled me this morning. This has really, really tickled me. I don't know why. This is probably the most I've laughed on a morning show for quite some time. Like I mentioned, like whenever they play, if there's a score, I'll talk about it. Oh God, I'm nearly crying. That's hilarious. Oh my goodness me. Giri1999 says, Tom, love the daily shows as always. Best Arsenal content creator without a doubt. Thanks, mate. Where do you think we'll finish at the end of the season? I think, if I'm being very honest, I think we'll finish third. That's where I think we will finish. How quickly we went from that to it's very somber and serious. It's I think it's very difficult to see us finishing above Liverpool at the moment. They look very good. They've lost one game all season, and they arguably didn't deserve to lose that either. They've been the best team in the league this season, and they deserve to be where they are. Man City typically end the season far stronger than they start it. And of course, I think for me, I'm really looking at Arsenal in the Champions League this season. I'm looking at the Champions League as a real opportunity for Arsenal. If we can get our players back, if we can get them fit for the second half of the season, if Timber can play a part, I'm really looking at the Champions League. If we go out against Porto, I'm going to be devastated. Absolutely devastated if we go out against Porto. But the league, we got to keep pushing away, keep ploughing away, and keep picking up these wins and staying as much in the race as we can, because we got to keep looking over our shoulder a little bit, because it's not exactly ordained that we're going to finish in the top four either. So you got to keep looking over your shoulder at that. But the Champions League is definitely like what I'm looking at for sure. Let's go to Bulgarian Gooner says, if we are spending 80 million on a forward, isn't it better that we look at an Osimhen or Vlahovic or an Isak rather than a Tony? Yeah, if you said that you've got 80 million to spend and I can choose between Isak or Tony, I'm choosing Isak all day long. Isak has been as good as Tony has been in the Premier League already for me in the short time that he's spent here. Yes, he's had his injury problems, but he's got 14 goals this season already. He scored 10 goals in his first season. I'm curious now how many of those were from open play. I can probably do a quick comparison, actually, between Tony and Isak. I think it's actually a really good comparison to do between Isak and Tony. Let's have a quick check, shall we? Is it going to let me do it? So last season, okay. Last season, let's have a look. Annoyingly, it says 2 clubs. I think he played a couple of games for Dortmund. But, okay, so he scored 10 goals. Goals minus penalties, 9. And I've picked the wrong season for Tony. 2 seconds. It was 23-24, which is this season. 22-23 was his second season. 21-22 was his first season. There we go. So in Tony's first season in the Premier League, he scored 7 non-penalty goals. Isak, in his first Premier League season, scored 9 non-penalty goals, unless that includes one that he scored at Dortmund before he left, which annoyingly I can't check, which is really, really irritating. In fact, yes, I'm sure I can check it. FBref, Isak, overall profile. Where's that season? 22-23, Premier League. He got 8. Okay, so 8 non-penalty goals during that season. Tony got 7 in his first season. And, of course, Isak is 24 now. And this season, Isak has already got how many goals for Newcastle this season? 8 non-penalty goals. And there's a second half of the season still left to play. And of course, Tony's best record of non-penalty goals is 14. So Isak is only 6 goals away from matching Tony's best Premier League record of non-penalty goals. And I think as well, you have to take into account, I just really like Isak's all-round game. There's something about it. I just quite like it. That said, Tony does does get more assists, I guess, so that could come into the conversation as well. But I think if you were to put Isaac into this Arsenal team, he's also a little bit more versatile, Isaac, as well. He can play in a wide area too, and has played in a wide area with Callum Wilson playing through the middle. So I suppose that's a bit of an advantage as well to signing Isaac. But yeah, if he was available, without a doubt, I'd rather spend the big money on Alexander Isak than I would spend it on Ivan Toney. So yeah, for me, Isak would be great. And I actually think I was wrong. I remember talking about Isak when we were linked to him and that 70 odd million. It's easy to say it now with the benefit of hindsight, of course. But I think I was wrong when I used to talk about Isak and say, I wouldn't pay that 75 million euro release clause. I was wrong. We should have done. I hold my hands up. We absolutely should have paid that release clause. And I'm really frustrated that we didn't, and Newcastle did. We're going to end the show there. I'm going to take a little bit of time to sit back, reflect, and see how I can make even more of tomorrow's show about the women's team. But thank you so much, guys, for listening. I appreciate all of you, genuinely all of you. You've made me laugh today. I've had a great morning on this show, and I really appreciate your support and your kind words. Enjoy yourself. It's a scary world out there. Be happy. Don't let things bother you. Like, really, it's just life's too short. Far, far, far too short to get irritated by, I don't know, talking about women's football. But thank you so much for tuning in and for joining us today. It is very much appreciated. Do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. There may be a show tonight. There may not. I'm not 100% sure yet. There'll definitely be one tomorrow morning, as always. But other than that, it's been a real pleasure, as it always is. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy. And as always, up the Arsenal. Which, by the way, I forgot to say at the end of yesterday's show. How ridiculous. I suppose I probably should say it twice to make up for that. So, yes, indeed, up the Arsenal.